Welcome, Mark, from Davos, Switzerland. And it was good to see you recently, and I appreciated your hospitality and love everything you do there, which we'll talk about here. So again, welcome to the Leaders Who Care series. And best way to start, as always, if you could, this is the key word, briefly introduce yourself, but not about the business or anything. Like, where are you from originally, where you are now, family, something you never told anybody that you want to reveal to the world now. That's always pretty interesting. You don't have to, but it's pretty cool. Share a little bit.
I was born in Canada. My
Yes.
parents come from South Africa. I grew up in England. I've lived in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Boston, as well as the French Alps and Paris. I currently live in Berlin, but I spend a lot of time in Switzerland, particularly Zurich, and then there's Davos as well, but not so much to live, but to do things.
Mhm.
Um, I did my PhD work in collective intelligence and crowdsourcing, but I was a terrible, let's say, academic. So rather than finishing my PhD thesis, I decided to self-publish my mostly written thesis. I turned it into a business book, and I sold 1,000 copies of my thesis at $150 each. This goes back a while ago when it was serious money. And so that meant at the age of 25, I didn't have a PhD, but I was earning 3 times more money than my professor. So yeah, so it's something that not a lot of people sort of know. But then, yeah, so I'm just having a more entrepreneurial mind. Uh, I like fixing things and coming up with stuff. Just like I've got to play with my brain.
Well, experiences are as much education as academic education. Doesn't make one better, worse, wrong, right? But they are real, and I do like that. And success is, we should be happy with success as we define it, however we define it, and which is getting into a whole mental health subject there. But the best we can be should be great to make us happy in whatever we do. So.
So I'm reminded as you say this about sort of intention, experiences, and let's say setting expectations sort of right. So I used to travel a lot. I mean, I was based in Boston, and I would be on an airplane every 3 days, quite literally 3 days. And I would get upgraded all the time. I was once traveling with one of my colleagues, and I watched him completely freak out and lose his mind because he didn't get upgraded. At that time, I thought, well, okay, and then I didn't get upgraded either. We're going to sit next to each other. So I then thought, well, sure, I could get angry, but if I look at him, his whatever veins are throbbing, he's upset, but he didn't pay any extra money for the ticket. So he doesn't really deserve the upgrade. So it's nice that he thinks that he deserves it. But to be honest, the people that are paying for the expensive seats, they deserve it. So right now, I will then temper my expectations. I'd also realized, and I must have read something that said, look, or no, I don't remember what it was. I was speaking to people about going to fantastic restaurants, and I discovered that the people that critique fantastic restaurants tend to have a miserable time because they're looking for things to be wrong rather than enjoying the moment, the feeling, and the atmosphere. And so the critique people would like pay a huge amount of money and just get very annoyed because this one thing had just a tad too much whatever
Right.
herbs, oregano in it.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, if I set my expectations slightly above zero, then it means I'm happy almost all the time.
Well, you can be a little bit more even above zero, but I agree. First world problems they may call it, and things
Yeah,
of that nature, and gratitude can play a big play in how you are in that respect. And
yeah,
you don't have to be. You're not. It doesn't mean you're not successful, or you don't have to. You can't be happy if you're not the famous athlete or the famous actor or the famous politician
yeah.
or whatever. You're great if you did your best, and you're great there. And I find a lot of that comes from when we were kids and teenagers. There's a big thread of there, and I work. I know somebody very well who does a lot of work with kids, and from birth to three. He's working on helping parents from birth to three. This amazing foundation of knowledge that kids pick up, and foundation of their whole everything
Mhm.
that kids pick up. And I'd like to hear a little bit what you were like as a kid or a teenager. Were you organizing people then? Were you doing a lemonade stand entrepreneurship? Were you in reading, sports? What were you like?
So I was the eldest of four kids.
Hmm.
And so like with 11 months between me and my brother, and then a sister, and then the younger one was a little bit younger. So one thing, as I'm reflecting on my life now about who I am and where I'm from, is that generally parents, particularly the mother, will need to invest the most amount of time in the child that needs it most.
Mm.
It's very rarely the eldest.
Right.
So that means that for me, as the eldest, and I was pretty much, I mean, I was the least important one pretty much almost immediately because there was a younger one and always a younger one coming in. This meant that I was pretty much, at least to my mind, left to myself, and I could do what I wanted to go do and whatever I found interesting. So nobody was trying to look after me, or because also when you have four kids, I mean, even if you want to invest all of your effort in one, you've got four, so it doesn't really matter. So that meant that I could do what I like doing. So I like reading. My father played chess. I picked up playing chess, and I ended up playing chess very well.
Oh,
I
cool.
just found it interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I then ended up being my much more entrepreneurial. So I had my first whatever money making business when I was 6 years old. It was a school. It was a puppet show inside the primary school. My mother had bought some felt, and so me and one of my school friends, we sort of been at my house and we made these puppets. We then persuaded the school to allow us to take over a classroom. I remember we made a little poster there. We charged kids about 5 cents or 10 cents to come in, and it was so good that somebody literally peed their pants.
Well, I hope it wasn't
And
you.
no, no, close to stand. No, no, I was fine. I mean, I was sort of front of state. I was back. I wasn't at the front of house. I was back of house, and I was organizing. So I was like, I had my finger up a puppet's butt. But anyway, that was just different. No, no, no. Can we just? It's a finger puppet. That's just what you
So
do.
you could have been the first Jim Henson with the Muppets.
I could have been. I think Jim Henson already existed by then, so I could have. I couldn't quite match him for time. Um, and the Muppet Show was very important to me. Halfway down the stair, and all of these things from Kermit the Frog. Um, but yeah, so I mean, this sort of childhood stuff does sort of form a lot of things about attachment styles, how you connect with other people, how you grow up your own kids, the things that you see right or wrong. So, I mean, for my parents divorced when I was 7.
Hmm.
And then my father sort of moved to a different part of town and then moved countries. And so, therefore, when I grew up, I had very little like a father role model in my actual life. Um, but then that meant that when I had first one son and then two sons, then I was trying to work out, well, okay, what for me is a what should I do as a father since I have no role model or reference model,
Right.
and all I can know is I shouldn't do what he did.
Right.
So now, what I ended up doing, as one example, is that when my youngest was 11 years old, I'd looked at the World Economic Forum report on the future of work, and that had a list of skills that would be needed in the future of work. Well, I went through those skills like creative problem solving, complex problem solving, creative thinking,
Oh,
empathy in the workplace.
this is at 11?
Oh, well, this was why he was
Oh,
11.
he was
I
11.
was,
Sorry.
yeah, I
Right.
was a bit older than that. So I was the father figure. And so I was then working out, well, I could actually write a course for my kids on learning these skills because I wasn't taught any of these skills formally in any education setting, and that includes up to PhD level.
Well, yeah.
So I wrote a course, and it used to be 10 minutes to walk to school. And so there would be, let's say, 26 modules on critical thinking, 10 minutes to teach, getting there, and then pick up on the way back, 10 minutes reflection and embedded knowledge. And then it was laddered up, next one, next one, next one. And it worked quite well. So now, 18 years old, studying physics at university, totally happy, friendly nerd, always good.
So it's fascinating because God knows we need more critical thinking extraordinaire right now in the world. And so even going through your education and as you say, even as a father, but even before as a father, were you envisioning this entrepreneurship? Were you envisioning how you can solve things?
So when I was 7 years old, I remember writing an essay about what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I wanted to be a businessman because I had a typo in it. As I remember it, it was like a gold star being peeled off. And when I was a teenager, I remember my mother asking, "What do you want to be?" And I said, "I want to be in business." And I remember my mother going to the kitchen and pointing at a bucket and a sponge. And she said, well, then you could be a window cleaner. Because if you want to be whatever, the CEO of a business, well, you can get started. You can be the CEO, head of marketing, head of sales. Just do it.
Hmm.
So, but that at least gave me the lesson. So, like, hey, maybe I should be a little bit more specific about what it is that I want to go do. Um, I did already know that I didn't really want to work for anybody else. When I did my PhD, I was part-time working at Intel and just looking at how the corporate world worked. It's just like, I'm not going to fit in. So I then was, when finishing the academic education, I was moving straight into a world of doing consultancy, doing paid for research. For me, was just, I'd rather have my own business. But then it turns out that I wasn't very good at it when I started. Even though I did business school in the UK, they didn't teach me cash flow. So I basically almost went bankrupt in the first 6 months because they didn't teach me about, yeah, cash flow. If you spend more than you have, even if the money's coming in, if you haven't sent an invoice, you go bust. So that was a huge wake up call for me as a whatever 25-year-old. I employed two or three people. I had to fire them all because I can't afford your salaries. I had to negotiate with the bank to give me a line of credit. And then I negotiated with myself to say, look, within 12 months, I will pay back all of the money that I owe. I will then have at least 10K in the bank and money coming in. And if I don't do that, I will give up and become a consultant for somebody else. And that was a lot of motivation for me. So I changed my behavior pretty much the next day. And I managed to achieve my goals within 10 months because I was very motivated to not work for somebody in some big consulting firm.
Sure. It's interesting. Um, our first jobs type of thing, beyond being a kid, like you went to Intel, you were at GM Europe, I think, for a bit too.
Yeah.
And that it's probably a great way to start because it either tells you one or the other, which one you like really quickly. And so you kind of caught the founder bug early in your lifetime, wanting to be an entrepreneur. Was that was that the particular time that Idea Dollar began? Is that what you're referring to, or was Idea Dollar later?
So Idea Dollar was later. So what I did then was that I created a lifestyle business. So there's lifestyle business and real business. Real business, you employ people, you have debt, and your employees got paid and you don't. Real business. Hopefully it worked.
Exactly.
Lifestyle business. You go to Cancun. It's a product development retreat, and it's an expense. Lifestyle business, different
Right.
type of business. So I started with the lifestyle business. In fact, the first name for my business was Turrell Consulting and Research, because people in that sort of academic world would name things after themselves. I was quite horrified when I got the phone book. These were days when actual phone books existed, and my name had been shortened in the phone book to be Terrell Cotton because obviously consulting and research.
Right.
Okay, so I thought, okay, I
They
can't be
couldn't
that then.
afford just to put an S there.
Yeah, exactly. Please, come on. So, I ended up like during my PhD work, I've been looking at how different companies were using technology in different ways, and I coined a term imaginatique,
Hmm.
meaning applying imagination to technology. And I thought that's a good name for a company.
Yeah.
At the time that my girlfriend partner was German, I also liked the look of a K, so I called the company Imaginatic. And so Imaginatic started off doing my bits of consulting and research. But then at a certain point, I decided to build product because I couldn't see consulting scaling. I was obsessed about scaling things, nonlinear growth.
Hmm.
And then when I created a product set called Idea Central about ideas, and then that ended up creating a spin-out company called Idea Dollar, which had a virtual currency and that was buying people's ideas over the internet.
Well,
99.com
ahead
part
of
one. Great fun.
ahead of your time. Ahead of your time. Were there any accomplishments at Imaginatic that stood out for you or stand out for you?
So, I mean, imagine that team. In the end, I did an IPO on the London Stock Exchange back in 2006. So that's not bad.
Yeah.
Our first bit of outside capital was going public. So that's quite a rare achievement.
Yeah.
We won the Queen's Award for International Trade in the United Kingdom, got to meet the Queen and various princes and other stuff. So it was quite cool. Um, that also got me on the World Economic Forum radar. But
Yes.
what I actually enjoyed more was actually seeing what was being done with our technology. So I was sort of pioneer of collective intelligence and crowdsourcing systems.
Hmm.
And it was amazing looking at how like putting a lot of behavioral science into technology meant that we could persuade good or even mediocre people to target their brain power at addressing problems that were worthy for companies to do something about. And it could be, I remember Kellogg's was saying, how do we cut out weight from our packaging? Because every 1% of weight that we can cut is worth globally this much CO2 and this much cost. So, do you have any things? And the reason why I mentioned the great and the mediocre people, sometimes the people that they weren't the top of the food chain, these were whatever supervisors, they did good work and a good job, but they weren't whatever head of R&D. They would have some observation to say, well, why do we glue it on four places when we could just have stronger glue and glue it on two places? It's a good point because the clever people would never see that because they haven't been on the factory floor before.
Whoever
So for
thought,
me,
whoever thought, sorry to interrupt. I remember the
yeah.
days when the executive didn't include people in operations or manufacturing or whatnot. And I was working at Deloitte at the time, and Northern Telecom was a client, and I met the CEO came into the boardroom where we were doing our audit stuff, and I said, "Hey, I was just doing inventory at Northern Telecom. You got amazing stuff at that place over there." I talked to the people; they were amazing, and he said, "I've never been there." And I said,
Mhm.
"Really?" So I get what you're saying. That's where they know what's going on.
So, and I found that for all, I mean, I did, so I loved like measuring return on investment. So even for the things were a little bit soft and fuzzy, but at least we were able to, I did a project with Bristol Myers Squibb, who had a diabetes medicine that had just gone off patent. And we were able to track which ideas, and there were three, I mean, it was such a valuable thing that they had a bunch of CEOs and the top executives having a retreat, come up with ideas. They then paid a big consulting company at the time, I think 100 grand to come up with ideas. And then there was our pilot project of our brand new technology called Idea Central, where people were offered, I think the winning idea would win a $50 AT&T gift card, which was not usable outside of the US. Just so that we, and after that, there were 500, there were some hundreds of ideas generated across all three. Some 20 of the ideas were picked out to be developed. 10 of them got implemented, and they added $200 million to the launch revenue of this brand new product. Fantastic. All of the ideas that were good came from our system, not just like some, but all of them. All of the CEO ideas, total crap, because it turns out if you're having a meeting with executives, like we should sell more drugs to people who need them underlying. Okay, I mean, like, I understand as head of marketing that you're what? Whereas the like one of the winning ideas had the use of celebrity sufferers that came from our system, so that it goes back now sort of several years, many years.
Hmm.
And then another one that came out was somebody from German who'd been working at Germany, German Merck. They'd had this testing vehicle for diabetes that would drive around sporting things. This then became a tricked out Winnebago that would go to all kinds of sporting events in the US, and they could measure how many prescriptions got like so there were all kinds of things. I just became fascinated about understanding data, how people used it, and I just became curious about all kinds of stuff, just lots of stuff, and still curious now, thankfully.
Yeah, no kidding. We got to keep curious. If we lose curious, we lose a lot. You know the well, it's I know you won that WEF Tech Pioneer Award, and I guess that
Yeah.
was an impetus for, I'm assuming, to join WEF at that point and stuff, right?
So yeah, so the World Economic Forum. I mean, I'd read about it. I'd heard of Davos beforehand, and even though now, as we're recording this in 2025, I mean now there's whatever 10 15,000 people plus go to Davos. It wasn't that way beforehand, so this really was the sort of the secret world. 2,500 invited people, maybe another 1,000 people max. um, it felt as though the whole place was super secure and everything else. So one of our clients actually nominated us. I think it was Pfizer who nominated us, and we didn't even know that we were nominated, and we certainly didn't know they were going to win. And then when I got this sort of nomination thing through for this tech pioneer, would I like to apply? I have to give them money. but at least it's not like one of these whatever London-based whatever an award show. We've come up with an association to literally give you personally an award, and it'll cost you 20,000 to get it,
No.
but it's yours.
Yeah, you bought your
So this
award.
was so the World Economic Forum thing. And I mean, I spent $30,000 even back then. This goes to 2008 to be a member and everything else. But our average revenue per client was over 100,000 per client per year, and all of our potential clients were there. So it was fairly easy for me to cost justify going. What I did find, though, in being this sort of rarefied, sort of exclusive type of world, is that it was very transaction driven.
Mm,
So it was deal, deal, deal. I also found that um, there were no very few side events, but I'd already found, if you like, sort of what's happening now with this world of Davos and this UnDavos that we might get into, is that I'd found that there were these sort of Swiss bankers and Swiss accountants who they would have a different color badge to me. I'd have this nice white badge with World Economic Forum, and their badge was, I think, yellow and it said hotel badge. And they would go to almost all the things that I did in these sort of very few side events. They would be there for the breakfast, the lunches. And when, by the way, the only side events there were breakfast and lunches and parties, because everybody had agreed to not do counter programming with the World Economic Forum.
right.
And the WEF didn't serve breakfast, it didn't serve dinner, and its lunches were bad. So that allowed people to do these side events and the little holes that the WEF allowed people to have holes for. But when I discovered that it was possible to sort of go there anyway, I did the WEF thing again in sort of 2009. But then 2010, I wasn't invited, and the ticket price had gone up to 100,000, which is a little bit much. But 2011, I'd already left the company, so I didn't have the company budget. But I figured out to say, well, okay, if these Swissy people can go in, maybe I can sneak in too. And that was the sort of beginnings of the Undavos world.
Is that where you met Rich Stromback?
I didn't need. I met Rich Stromback in 2008, so he was the first guy that I met. Um, I met him in the. So he's a big guy. The Harvard Business Review actually wrote an article about him as being, I think, the king of Davos, because he was just the ultimate networker. So he'd
And
done
a and
Davos in
a and
2000.
a and a Canadian ex-hockey player.
Exactly. Well, and so at least I'm Canadian too. I'm not an ex-hockey player, but at least we had a few reasons for bonding. But we saw quite quickly that as tech people, investing people, and also people that didn't follow the rules, um, it then became interesting to see that okay, there's this side event world, and he already, even though he was white badge, his brother was not, and so he was one of the first people that learned the secret. Now he didn't tell me the secret for doing Davos, interestingly enough. And what would happen is that there were five or six, whatever, WEF type of people that had learnt the secret, and they had almost collectively agreed never to tell the secret to anybody else.
Of course, why would you do that?
So, because it's a good thing. I mean, you can charge people huge amounts of money for coming in, possibly, but you control the secret. I was therefore, I think, technically the sixth person who knew the secret. The thing is that I have a wider mission. I have a 25-year plan to change the world at scale, and. I use Davos as my test bed. And so for me, to make change at world scale, Davos is a really, really interesting platform. And if people think that there are conspiracies developed in Davos, you're completely right, just not the conspiracies that you think.
Hmm.
But there are, absolutely. Do these conspiracies work? No, not really. Most of the people do the conspiracies aren't actually very good at them. Um, and I had that. I had a network of girls spies once who would tell me lots of stuff. It was fascinating work. But the thing though is that Davos does, particularly now, it reduced the cost of coming, which meant that there are more women, there are more people from diverse backgrounds that are able to come. There are more topics that can be covered.
Right.
And for me, it was more important to have more people there because if there's a volume of people, the odds of getting great things happening goes up to 100%. We just don't know which.
Yeah, no,
But
I
in the
love
world
it.
of I mean, yeah, I mean, it's basically like it's a fight between a scarcity world and an abundant world. And abundance is better.
Yeah, and people will, it's almost like you talked about food critics. People will always, some people go in and try to find what's wrong. But there's plenty right, and there's so many of amazing people that really want to make a difference there. And I think with UnDavos, you've done a great job. And I want to get to what you're doing now also. Like, And like we say in LA, we got to leave them wanting more so we can do a sequel. We may have to do a sequel here. So, but I want to talk about how you're leading on a few great things on Orcasci and the science of spread on UnDavos we're talking about, which is, as you called it, which I love, meaningful presence with impact, and also on Fresh Solutions AI, which we chatted about a little
Mhm.
bit, and I'm really interested in. And you're doing them all at the same time, basically.
Yeah.
Um, how explain what they are, explain how they're synergistic that maybe allows you to do them at the same time, and also what we look as really important, and that we always will talk with leaders who care. You have to have an economic and social impact at the same time. You
Yeah.
can't have them separate. So if you can share about that, that'd be great.
So fresh. If I start with Fresh Solutions, so Fresh Solutions is the day job. So that makes it sound way too boring, but it's definitely not boring. So Fresh Solutions is an AI company making AI solutions based in Switzerland, and we have clients that are private sector, like Ipsos, PwC, and we have clients that are public sector, so the Swiss Federal Office of Public Health. And this gives me, I've got a business partner for that. And what we've done is that it gives me an opportunity to build stuff. I love building stuff and building it for customers that are paying us money. I love revenue. Revenue is fantastic. Just love
Right, of
revenue, love
course.
customers, love making stuff. And so we were able to take clients that my partner had on the consulting side, doing strategy work, and then take them over into being like, to execute your strategy, you need these cool AI things. So that's allowed us to build an AI advising platform called Pocket. Like,
Hmm.
get the best advice in your pocket. We built an AI interviewing platform, like doing interviews. I mean, this is kind of an interview, but we could also do this with AI powered. So follow-up questions generated by an AI. And then we have an AI analysis platform, just because there's loads of content that comes out when you start using AI powered stuff. But so
Hmm.
you need some sort of human help. So that for me is, but that's a real business that can scale. It can get funding. You can see it having target markets, multiple offices, hiring people. So I would consider that to be real business. Then if I backfill in, then I've got Orcasci. So, and by the way, where the name comes from is that if I were an animal, I would be an orca, top of the food chain, lots of good reasons. So therefore orca, and then science, so science fiction, Orcasci.
Nice.
Um, so for me, it's actually more of a lifestyle business. So I don't hire people into that business. It allows me as a vehicle to do projects that I find interesting, fun, and fascinating. Now I work for one of the big US media companies, and I met them in Davos, and their challenge was, how do you make $5 million of extra profit from online sites? And I remember charging them $35,000 for a 3 hour workshop, money back guarantee if it didn't work out. And I kept all the money because I invented some remarkably cool stuff that never come up before. I did let them know beforehand that I don't know anything about your industry, but we'll figure it out. So, but
Sometimes,
I just had a,
but by the way, sometimes I find clients are asking me when it comes to talent, can you please find somebody not in our industry? We need new
yeah,
perspective, new ideas, new everything.
well, and completely right. And one of the things when I'd been speaking to him, I worked out, like, okay, how big is the problem? But then it was also, how long have you been trying to fix this problem? And if you fix it, how much is that worth in terms of value? And so it turns out they've been trying to fix it for 3 years. They'd already lost two executives because they'd failed to do it. So this is a hard problem.
Right.
In that case, brilliant. But it also means for me then is I have different toolkits that I would use to solve problems like that. So that means, okay, I can't use any of the easy things. I have to use this and this and this. So that was intellectually great fun. It doesn't really scale because you're looking for whatever, lots of one-off projects. What I'm doing with Orcasci now is that like, things that I build that don't sit into Fresh Solutions because they're not that type of thing. They live within Orcasci. For example, the most widely used app in Davos is called Davos Week. And Davos Week is like time out for Davos. So there's like literally over 1,000 side events in there. And the only way of navigating this is obviously to have a keyword search and say, I'm interested in leadership, I'm interested in sustainability, and I'm interested in robotics.
Right.
Well, there'll be an event on that. So that technology lives within Orcasine. And so I have that business allows me to build things over time that might morph into an idea farm.
Right.
because
Sounds.
then I spin things off.
Hmm.
And then there's UnDavos, which is another thing, um, which is so UnDavos is a community fundamentally, and now it's not anti-World Economic Forum.
Right.
If anything, my goal is to change the World Economic Forum kind of from the outside inside, because it's a tremendous opportunity in gathering people together. But then I think that just they don't make use of the time that they have. But partially because of the constraints that they have of just like they have a limited amount of seats in their venue, and they charge people huge amounts of money to do stuff, which means you have to say exactly the right stuff. So it's a bit boring. What UnDavos does, it's about with the mission of democratizing Davos, then humanizing Davos, and then bringing action to Davos. Now, if you look at undavos.com, you can see that we had our 2025 conference, which was the biggest event in Davos, apart from the World Economic Forum. Over 71 sessions in all kinds of different. I mean, there was. I went in on Monday morning, and there was relationship tango. People, whatever, literally dancing tango to talk about leadership models. And then in the afternoon, there was like a TEDx that was there. And then on Thursday, I mean, I saw the oceans. There was the Deepak Chopra event where it was literally so full that people are like lying on the floor to get a little bit of space. So,
I actually
but not.
saw some of that in action from when you woke up in the morning to when I saw you around Davos to whatever.
Yeah.
It's it's fascinating. You know, one thing I find that's a line, a thread between as a kid to now is you became really effective and passionate about bringing people together. And one thing I learned from Blue Zones and other things of being in talent and leadership, and especially from sports, is the thing that fills people's hearts and souls more than anything is belonging. And
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
think that's what you're doing. They're belonging because they want knowledge. They're belonging because they want a relationship. They're belonging because they want to belong and be part of something. And I commend you for that because it is the most important thing I think that people want out there. And I think it does turn into economic and social impact at the same time. Because if you're on a team, that's what happens. You win the championship together. I mentioned we'll probably have to do a sequel on this, but I do have one more question I want to ask you here. And I had a client that told me in 2021, he told me, you know, Mark, the year 2020 was the year that flew by slowly. And I thought that was kind of brilliant. And we still kind of feel like it was yesterday and years ago all at the same time. Um,
Mhm.
with that said, we're already in 2025 now, as the time flies is an understatement, or time zooms would be more appropriate right now. um, what are you most grateful for, and what are you most hopeful for?
Oh, let's see. I think I'm quite pleased to have this human body because it means I get to experience whatever you humans people do and everything else, and they can do all kinds of fun, crazy, interesting stuff.
Are you an alien in a human
Oh,
body right
absolutely.
now?
No,
Or
oh, absolutely. I'm made of light. I'm visiting your planet.
good to meet you.
The sort of intergalactically, we're still perplexed about why you named your planet after dirt. And our thing is go before they kill all the animals is pretty much what we have on the list. But yeah, but that also helps me to disassociate somewhat to whatever, the vast amount of oddness, craziness, and other things that take
Well,
place.
you do know,
Um,
I gotta throw this in. You do know that aliens have started to realize because they come down and they look at us and they see that we're feeding the dogs, we're taking them for walks, we pick up their poop when they poop, and all that stuff. They think that the dogs are in charge.
um, I think cats would beg to differ.
They would.
Yeah,
There's always
yeah,
another story.
yeah.
But anyway, sorry,
And
go
by the
ahead.
way,
Grateful and
cat.
hopeful.
So, if I look at, let's say, what's hopeful, so I mean, genuinely speaking, so I think it's tricky in this day. So, COVID was sadly a wasted opportunity. If we look at the trillions of dollars that were created, the vast amount of time we had on our hands, what did we do? We put on 15 kilos, and we didn't even force anybody to put on like a change electric lights.
We did watch Ted
So,
Lasso, though.
this is actually, I don't think it came over. Maybe wasn't allowed to. It didn't get streamed over here, so we didn't
Wow.
see it. And we learned we're in a global planet and we didn't have TV shows. So, the For me, therefore, but that those times were, let's say, vast amounts of whatever like not connecting. So it was, I mean, what I'm pleased about was that at the back end of this thing, the lesson that we learned wasn't that we shouldn't touch each other or we shouldn't hug each other. So fortunately, we sort of realized that human connection is important.
Totally.
I think that the good thing is there are many problems that are out there. There are many opportunities, but what I actually see is the biggest opportunity now is that 2025 is already a remarkable year, and I think we're about to enter into an absolutely stonkingly, like, just shocking phase of our life, because effectively you have whatever one country with its electoral process has picked out a particular way of doing things, and it was written on the box, so nobody can say, well, okay, it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody because really, like, we will do this. I think because there'd been, let's say, nobody had ever done what they'd said beforehand, to actually having somebody that says, well, I'm going to go execute on it. What it's doing is we're seeing not ripple effects, but basically tsunami effects are basically going to roll across the world in almost every area of life.
Right.
You look at whether it's international development aid organizations, and many of them do phenomenal work, but also could be fat, dumb, and happy. Right now, if you take out 40% of the budget across everything, well, if it was only one thing, you could cover up the gap. But if it's everywhere, it means you have to fundamentally rethink what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Right.
I think what's now happening, and if it's tariffs, will then force every single country to have a look at what they're doing. So I see now as we have basically a complete destabilization of the world is taking place.
You think?
It hasn't finished destabilizing yet. So if this were a disaster movie, just not saying that it's going to be a disaster, but if it were, we're not looking at the last 5 minutes of the movie. We're basically looking at the crackers going through LA. The guy is trying to get in the first airplane, but he doesn't know there's going to be a second airplane and there's going to be two volcanoes. We don't know how this thing is going to end yet. But I see as there is a large scale destabilization. But when things begin to become unstable, it means that for entrepreneurs, for people with an opportunistic mindset and open mindset, you have to have new solutions. And so finally, there is now space that we're forced to have new solutions to our problems, issues, challenges, and opportunities because we can't do the old stuff anymore. So I
Right.
think that for me still makes me hopeful.
Well, I get what you're saying, and I think if we play the hopefulness properly, I think AI might have the biggest impact that technology should have had before on everything, especially
Yeah.
healthcare, but on everything. And it may even allow us, if business leaders are smart, to take advantage of the extra profits that are going to be made by people being laid off and put some of those to people to help in community, whether it's teachers or caregivers or building gardens at schools or whatnot. So the business leaders are involved in the community and literally make us maybe happier and healthier than we've ever been.
It's going to be a what happens next is going to be extremely interesting to keep seeing. So the
Interesting is an interesting word to use.
yes, I mean, it's doing a lot of work, isn't it? It's doing a lot of work.
um,
But so we will see. I mean, fundamentally, if we're able to make housing cheaper, if we're able to make food cheaper, if we're able to make energy cheaper, transport cheaper, it allows people to live, and then you end up with bread and circus. People need to have at least, okay, maybe not bread and circus, but bread and let's call it bread, meaning, and circus. Um, People want to have a sense of meaning that they're doing something, and even if it's sort of civic work that they're doing, they need to be vaguely entertained and they need to be fed.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And
how all of these things will work?
well, I'm hopeful for all the things you said, and I'm hopeful that and grateful that you are a leader who actually cares and brings ideas to the table. So I appreciate that. I appreciate staying in your apartment while I was at Davos. I appreciate a lot of those things, and I'm hopeful for so much more. So thanks for being a leader who cares, and thanks for being on the series.
Very good. Thank you ever so much for having me. Thank you.